Stephen, great to have you back on the programme. France now has a new Premier Ministre. Michel Barnier has gone after that vote of no confidence. He said he was going to sort of work during this transition period. Well, now Macron has picked his new PM. Tell us about him.
Yes, good afternoon, Alex. My friend Barnier has gone, as we expected, because he was unable to keep a deal between the left and the right, and it was Macron attempting to keep the centrists in power. And what Macron has done, he's actually shifted the kind of political spectrum within his own movement, those who are supporting him, by appointing Francois Bayrou. Now, the big questions are, who is Francois Bayrou, and what will he bring to France? Where does it stand? Well, Francois Bayrou is 73 years of age. He's a politician who's been there for about 42 years, 29 years of age. He was first elected. He regarded himself initially when he was younger as a socialist. He believed in Gandhi's free movement, non-political violence, and drifted towards Giscard d'Estaing's what we call the socialist right of French Parliament. That is the sort of things that Macron is today. He's been a European minister. He's tried twice to become president of France and failed on both times, once calling Sarkozy out. But to get his political views, you have to understand some of his lines. He says that the European Union is the most beautiful political model ever. He regarded himself as a Clintonian, which is not surprising that he calls himself a man of the right wing, but yet he's a Clintonian, which is clearly someone of the left. But what it indicates, he is what in America they would call a rhino, a Republican in name only, or what in Britain we would call a Sino, a conservative in name only. He joined the right-wing movement because that's where the power was, but his heart and soul is definitely someone of a socialist and left-wing background. And what does that mean for Macron? Very clearly, it means Macron has decided not to go towards the right and Barnier in hope to try and deal with Le Pen's Front National, but also rather now to move towards the left, have someone who's more attuned to the left of the political spectrum. And maybe that's his hope. He can now bring in those left-wing parties that have been successful in the recent elections to try and do a deal to get the French economy moving and get the votes that Macron needs in that parliament. I was just
doing a little bit of context here, because essentially Michel Barnier, who of course was the Brexit negotiator, a very polite man. If you ever got stuck in a lift with him in Strasbourg, he was charming. But he actually sort of, when he wanted to go back and contest himself for the old Republican Party in France, so Sarkozy's party, to become their leader and have a pop at presidency, he went super right-wing, didn't he? Started talking tough on immigration and all of this. And at one point, Macron was sort of playing that game to try and sort of stop all the votes hemorrhaging over to Rassemblement. But then, with this vote of no confidence, it was about a budget which was in line with the EU's growth pact, ironically named, which was supposed to sort of, because France essentially were breaking the EU's rules as a Eurozone member for its debt to GDP ratio. So the EU was saying, oh, you need to introduce a bit of austerity, you know, like they did to the Greeks. Not as badly. And this was deeply unpopular in the Parliament, and both Rassemblement National, Marine Le Pen's lot, voted against Michel Barnier and voted a vote of no confidence. But so did, like you said, this left-wing coalition of parties who scrambled together, who were put together in the snap election to try and prevent Rassemblement from taking too many seats. So I assume what he's doing, like you said, is he's given up now trying to appease the right wing and go after the voters and the votes that Rassemblement have, because, well, the snap elections happen.
Absolutely. And I think
next presidential election is not till 2027, is it? This is about a sop to that left-wing coalition.
I think it is. I think that what the strategist within Macron's centralist party is saying, how do we position ourselves in a way to attack the group that we think somewhere across the country is the weaker area that we need to take voters from if we're going to try and survive when it comes to that presidential election. We think that the right has probably got its limit in terms of votes, so the soft ground is on the left. That would be the kind of strategic argument that they're considering. And with Bayrou, who formed the democratic movement, criticised Sarkozy heavily when Sarkozy was the president, what you've got is a man that is more of the left. And as we said, you're quite right, Barnier was incredibly charming. He was also smart. He surrounded himself with advisors who were equally charming. And in the elections, he moved to saying that we should close Schengen, that we should have more control of immigration. We should look to deport people who are the big issues. And France faces those same big issues that we have in terms of immigration. But France also faces a major problem economically with a declining economic environment after the wars in Ukraine, and also the continued arguments that we should loosen ties with China, where there's an awful lot of money that comes from China into France. So they're going to struggle on that front. So that's why they've got pressures to increase a budget that increases taxes, which is what the left wants, and also to decrease the pensions, which the left don't want, but the right does. So they're positioning themselves leftward for political long-term strategy and the short-term strategy to get through that board. And this is a man that will do it. He is a career politician who will move with the wind and has gone with all the major leaders in France just so he can keep a role. He is not a man, in my view, of principle, but a man of floating characteristics in order to keep himself in power.
It's interesting. You talk about principle, and on this point, I think there might be a little bit of political opportunity for Le Pen, because back in 2017, Francois Bayrou had to resign because he was accused of misappropriating funding when it came to the employment of parliamentary staff, which ironically is exactly what they're going after Marine Le Pen for, in the hope that they can get a ruling against her in the courts and prevent her from being able to stand in future elections. So in some respects, that could be a bit of a win for her, because she could turn around and say, OK, this guy was accused of doing the same thing. He's now the Prime Minister of France.
I think she should use that, because what we're seeing with Le Pen is what we're seeing with the AfD, is what we've just seen with a potential presidential candidate in Romania. It's what we saw with what Biden did in America, is using lawfare. And actually, to be fair, they did it with Boris Johnson. We're now using extraneous lawfare issues, pretend issues, issues that are not really potentially true, to bring down politicians who are regarded as right-wing or are not part of the elite and the state. I think it's disgraceful. I think lawyers involved in it, the politicians involved in it, are destroying our democratic environment. But if she can use this as an opportunity, all strengths to her.
Yeah, I totally agree, Stephen. It's always lovely catching up with you. And good old Michel Barnier, I wonder what he's going to do now. He should just put his feet up somehow. I doubt he will. But interesting to see what happens the other side of the channel. Good luck, France.
Thank you.